Welcome to Are You Chemistry GCSE Ready? This playlist takes you through loads of example questions and guided solutions for every single topic in your chemistry GCSE. So it's a perfect way for you to test your chemistry knowledge. If you feel like you need a quick review or you just want the ideal revision companion for these videos, then make sure to download my free chemistry GCSE revision notes. I've linked them in the description below. Or if you're ready, let's dive straight in.
Okay, let's answer some questions on the periodic table. So, first question here is what are groups and what are periods on a periodic table? So just to remember, your groups are the columns and your periods are the rows. What are the metals and non-metals? So they're split like this. You have your metals on the left-hand side and your non-metals on the right-hand side, but they're not split kind of down in a straight line. You have this kind of staircase line that makes the split between the two. And if you remember from the notes, you know where to start that staircase because you've got boron and aluminium, and you remember ballers, remember they're non-metals. Okay, next is to tell me how many electrons fit in each shell. 2 in the first, then 8 in the second, and then 8 in the third shell as well. And you don't need to know any of the other shells. Okay, and now how do we actually use this periodic table to help us do something? So for example, how can I use it to help me find the electron configuration of boron? So first I need to find boron in my periodic table, and there it is circled for me. And then I can notice its position in my periodic table. So it is period 2, or remember that means row 2, and that means that there are 2 of its shells occupied. And the next thing to know is what group it's in, and it is in group 3, which tells me about the number of electrons in the outer shell. So it tells me there are 3 electrons in the outer shell. So what's the configuration? I know it's occupying 2 shells. The first shell that it occupies must be full in order for it to occupy another shell. And I need to remember that in my first shell, when it's full, that means there are 2 electrons in my first shell. So I can write 2 dot, and then that's the next shell, that's 3 there. And I know that because it was in group 3 and there are 3 electrons in its outer shell, so 3. Okay, and then if I wanted to actually draw that, I would draw my first 2 in that first shell, and then I would draw the 3 in the outer shell like that. And it doesn't matter when you're drawing your outer shells where you put those 3 crosses. It doesn't matter which of those 8 positions they take. Okay, now to look at some questions about forming ions. So I'm asked to draw a diagram of an ion that forms from a beryllium atom, Be. Okay, so maybe a couple of things to note first. First thing is that it is in group 2, okay? And that is telling me that there are 2 electrons in its outer shell. Next thing I could notice it's on the left-hand side of my periodic table, and therefore it is a metal. And to remember that then when metals form ions, they lose electrons. Okay, non-metals tend to gain electrons, and metals lose electrons to form ions. So I'm just going to write my chemical symbol Be around some square brackets. And then, because I have lost 2 electrons, what I need to do is I need to put a +2 on the top right-hand side there to say I've got a net positive charge of +2, having lost those 2 electrons from my outer shell. And because you've lost 2 electrons from your outer shell, you can't show those electrons anywhere within your picture. So that's why you've just got the plain Be in the center of those square brackets. Okay, now I've been asked to draw an ion that forms from a chlorine atom, Cl, and to name that ion. Okay, so first let me find Cl in my periodic table, and there it is. So it is in period 3 and it is in group 7. Okay, so if I were to try and draw that outer shell of my chlorine atom, then I am drawing it with 7 electrons in its outer shell because it was in group 7. Okay, now I can think about what kind of ion it might form. So because it is a non-metal, it is going to form a negative ion. So that means that it is going to gain some electrons in this process, okay? And how many electrons it's going to gain depends on what group it's in, because it is going to gain enough electrons to have a full outer shell. So at the minute, because it's in group 7 and has 7 electrons, but I know that 8 electrons can fit in this outer shell, then there's room for 1 more electron for my chlorine. So how do I show that on my diagram? Where I've got my square brackets again and Cl in the center, but this time because I'm actually not just losing electrons from my outer shell, I've actually gained an electron. We do draw those electrons in. So see how I've got the same dots that I had for my chlorine atom, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 of them, and then I show the electron that I have gained with a cross. So this is a dot and cross diagram, and my dots are the electrons that I had, and then my crosses are to show the difference for the electrons here that I have gained. And since I've gained 1 electron, I am negatively charged, so I put that at the top. And then the final thing to remember here is that it's not called a chlorine ion, it is called chloride. Okay, and that is because I have formed an ion from my non-metal. So I don't just call it chlorine ion, I actually have the change in the end of the word to ride, chloride.
Just before we go into the tips and tricks section, if you do want some extra advice to getting that grade 9 for your GCSE, then why not download my free 20-minute exam success guide? Just click on the link in the description below. I'm going to give away all of my best advice and secrets, and completely for free, so why not?
Okay, so some tips and tricks for this section. So the first one is when you are deciding what period you are in the periodic table, be very careful not to miss out the first row. That's the one with H and He, hydrogen and helium in it. People often skip it out and say that that's not there and therefore get confused between period 1 and period 2. That is period 1, and the next row down is period 2. Okay, the other thing is you usually only need to actually draw the outer shells of ions if you're asked to draw a diagram of them, but make sure to read the question carefully in case that's not the case and you have to show actually the full inner shells first before you show that outer shell. Make sure using dots and crosses to show electrons, you are using the crosses to show that they were not on that original atom. So the one that we had with the chlorine atom, when we added the electron to make it chloride, that added electron was shown with a cross and all the other ones were shown with a dot in the outer shell. Yeah, and just to be careful that the names of your non-metal ions, the ending changes to "ide", so from chlorine for the atom to chloride for the non-metal ion.